What are your thoughts coming into game 2?
Well, you know, we talked about how it was going to be an even series between these two teams, and I think, to be honest, it has been pretty even, with the exception of those 2 catches onto Bacon Piggy. Now, if they tighten up their play, I think Paria have a good chance of bringing this to a 2-1, but if they play as loose as they did last game, I think that's the best way of describing it. They played quite loose, especially towards the end. I think we've got a good chance that Exertus are just going to take it.
Yeah, that could definitely be the case. Meanwhile, we do see the bans coming out fairly thick and fast. We can see Vlad, Skarner, and Elise coming out for the bans of this game. And Team Exertus decided to keep their bans the same as the last game. So, interesting that they've decided to ban the Skarner themselves. They had first pick. And what that kind of tells me is that they haven't quite adapted to the OP-ness that is Skarner in the current patch. But it is nice to see their adaptation this game. They have decided to get rid of the Vlad as well as a Dan on that Elise. Both very high impact champions in the last game. Even though Exertus managed to die in the 1v1 to QT Bacon Piggy, he still managed to pull out an incredibly impressive and strong Vladimir in that game 1. So it'll be interesting to see what Emberlight chooses to bring out in this game 2.
Yeah, I'm interested to see it as well, because obviously his Vladimir was quite good moving into the later game. I love the Elise ban, though. Frankly, I'm very surprised it didn't come out previously in the first game, because, you know, a small damage nerf doesn't really change the fact that Elise is really, really, really good at making picks. You know, Cocoon is still an amazing ability, so it makes sense to get rid of it. They are going to pick up Rek'Sai first as their jungler, which I quite like them doing, because I know Dan is a relatively good Rek'Sai player. And it sort of forces him to play something different, which, you know, last game, Dan on Elise was really, really strong.
Yeah, he had a good performance indeed, and we can see that they've actually decided to value this Braum once again. They did have the Kalista Braum last game, and they are going to go for it again. And as I mentioned in the last Champions Select, Lucian has been buffed, so I wonder whether or not they're going to go for an old-style Lucian Braum lane. It's definitely strong, and having known Subtomic for a fair amount of time, I know that he does actually, or he used to play a lot of Lucian, so I wouldn't really be that surprised to see it come out. Meanwhile, we can see the side of Team Paria have decided to take away the Kalista this game, and they're actually going to play Blitzcrank into this game, so maybe something that they're really familiar with. Maybe he's looking to get a lot of roams, and thinking about it going all the way back to the promotion tournament, I'm Best Support did really enjoy roaming. He really did enjoy moving to the mid lane, doing his best to get QT Bacon Piggy ahead, and I wouldn't be that surprised to see an early mobility boost come out and QT Bacon Piggy trying to impact the game as much as he can.
Picking up a Xerath here would be quite a bold move into a Blitzcrank, I think. If you do get caught out by that hook, it's over. Like, you know, there's no way you're going to be able to deal with that. Even with Flash, I think you probably would still just get locked up too much. So, yeah, Emberlight, you know, showing confidence moving into the second game against Paria. We are going to see another Sivir pick. So, we talked a little bit about her nerfs and how she might not be quite as potent after it. But apparently, these teams are still really valuing her very highly.
Yeah, they do seem to still like the utility that she can provide, and the composition that we saw last game with a double threat in terms of the top and mid didn't really work out in conjunction with the Sivir, so maybe Exertus can make it work slightly better in their favor. But I know that a long time ago, Emberlight used to play quite a lot of Xerath, and it's nice to see him bring it back out, but I feel like in the current meta, Xerath really isn't that strong of a champion anymore. He really doesn't have very many defensive options available to him, and while he is definitely a decent champion, he's not quite top tier. I feel like champions like Azir, like Victor, are still up there, and in fact, I'm a little bit surprised that Victor's actually managed to make it through. Instead, they have decided to go for the Ahri, and QT Bacon Piggy, definitely well known for his Ahri, something that he really enjoys playing, and I feel like we actually have quite a nice pick composition coming out from Team Paria.
They do have a nice pick comp, and I like the fact that they're going for something like that up against a Xerath, because if Xerath falls behind in this game, it's going to be like the situation with Paria last game, but even worse, because they don't have a Hecarim top to do damage either. So, also, I just want to touch on one other thing about the Xerath pick, which I think is really awkward. If you're picking it into a Callista, it's going to be pretty difficult to land most of your skill shots on her. I mean, she is going to be moving around quite freely most of the time, assuming that Exertus are on the back foot in team fights, which I think they will be, considering we're going to be looking for like a charm or a hook to start a fight off.
Well, they do have the Maokai locked in for the side of Flash, and we saw last game how potent those teleport home guards in from Chriso was on that Maokai, catching off Bacon Piggy more times than they really should have allowed him to be caught out. So if they get a nice flank off, and that's still available on Rek'Sai, he can tunnel in from the side, get a decent engage off with a follow-up Righteous Glory. They definitely have a lot of options available, but I feel like with their style of composition, they'll be looking to find someone out of position, rush them down, get the pick, exactly like we saw from Exertus in that last game. And with the numbers advantage, they'll use that to push on to objectives. And as you rightly said, the thing that I'm worried a little bit about for Impolite is there's very little hard crowd control coming out for Exertus. They've decided to run with an Aurelia top, and with Chriso being a very mechanically strong individual, I can definitely see him performing well, but I feel like in terms of the team composition, it doesn't really offer that much. Like, there is a bit of a split push threat available to Chriso, but other than that, I feel like their team fight prowess is actually quite a lot weaker than that for Team Paria.
Yeah, I mean, another thing which I think is again an issue with the Xerath pick. I mean, we're harping on about it a little bit, but it requires really good coordination with, for example, something like a Gragas. Because if you open up with your rotation right as Gragas decides to explosive cask, you're going to be a very, very sad panda. So Impolite's got to play this perfectly, and we'll have to see if he manages to do that.
And he's doing it against QT Bacon Piggy, who's had his Ari banned, I believe, at least 4 times in the last few games that he's been played. So definitely a strong and familiar champion that he's on. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. And last game, we did see Impolite die 1v1 to this QT Bacon Piggy. And with the matchup as it is, I wouldn't really be that surprised to see it happen again. So hopefully Impolite has brushed off the rust that was sitting on top of him last game, and this game, hopefully, things will work out a little bit better. But looking at the two team compositions, how do you think this early game is going to pan out?
Well, I think the early game is going to be all about that Rek'Sai, right? You know, he has very high gank pressure in pretty much all of these lanes. You know, they have good enough crowd control in all of the other lanes that when he comes in, someone is going to be locked up unless they burn a flash. You know, bot lane, you've got that hook, you've got the knock up, the power fist coming out of Blitz. Top lane, you've got a knock up as well as a twisted advance, and in that middle lane, Charm can do some serious work. Being as immobile as he is, Impolite is also not going to be able to easily dodge any tunnels and knockups that come out of Rek'Sai. So I think it really is going to be about strong vision control coming out of Exertus, making sure they know where that Rek'Sai is, making sure that they can stop her from coming in and picking up easy ganks. The one who's going to have to do that is Dan, because as soon as someone roams a little bit out of one of these lanes, there's going to be a lot of pressure onto them, because it's going to be hard to do that safely with Tremor Sense coming out of Rek'Sai too. So yeah, I'd say the early game, you know, it's basically all about that Rek'Sai. If I were to look at a lane and say, you know, where is the action going to be, imagining there's no jungler, it would be bottom lane, because you've got the Blitzcrank hooks that obviously everyone knows the amount of playmaking potential there is. Now, again, it's going to be down to the support player, I'm best support, to make some big plays with those hooks. And I personally haven't seen it yet from him, so, you know, I'm interested to see if they can pull it off.
Well, I'm excited to see a Blitzcrank. Blitzcrank is always a fun champion to cast. And I agree with you, the amount of impact that Rek'Sai will have in this early game is pretty massive, because he has so many options, as you said. There's so much available to him to gank. With the massive kill pressure available to Ari, she can impact that middle lane so massively. And with a bit of assistance coming out from Rek'Sai, it really could snowball in their favor. So I'm looking forward to this early game coming out from Team Paria, but it's down to them to make these proactive plays. We didn't see that much early pressure from Memses in the last game, so hopefully he can pick it up a bit more this game, and, you know, hopefully they can build that early lead, and once they have it, they did get that early lead last game, so if they can get that early lead again and maintain it, then I feel like Team Paria might be able to bring this to a 1-1. And if you guys have only just joined us, this is game 2 between Exertus Esports and Team Paria. And the first game was taken by Exertus Esports with a fantastic composition and fantastic play coming out from their substitute Chriso. So we should be jumping into the game in a brief while. But please do remember that you can vote for which team you believe will win this game, and you should have a link available in the chat, and it should appear on screen for you in a little while. But we are going to be jumping into game. Exertus Esports is going to be on the red side this game, up against Team Paria on the blue side.
And a few interesting things we didn't get a chance to touch on because we spent so much time talking about Impolite Seraph pick that I think are worth mentioning. The bottom lanes have reversed somewhat here, right? So last game we saw I'm Best Support and Subtomic with the Callista and the Braum. Now, this time around, the fact that Pugex is playing that Callista, and he did a good job of winning lane last time around, I think is a little bit worrisome for Exertus, just because of the fact that Callista really ought to do a good job in that bottom lane.
Yeah, that is definitely true, and Chriso very narrowly avoiding that Blitzcrank there. I'm a little bit surprised they decided not to collapse on Blitzcrank. Oh, but he might be caught out.
Man. This time around, I don't think he's going to be quite so lucky. There's the Equilibrium Strike. Braum passive is just ridiculous in these early game fights. Chriso is flashing over that wall to try and chase, but with no Blade Surge, he's not going to be able to follow it up. Not a bad situation for I'm Best Support to be in, to be honest. I mean, he did burn a flash out of Chriso. That might allow for Flash at the top lane or not in Summerspell to make something happen there.
Yeah, I'm not sure why Chriso decided to flash. They got the flash out of I'm Best Support, and that should have been enough, and he should have realized that he's never going to catch up to Blitzcrank, even if Blitzcrank hadn't decided to skill his W, and that is going to hurt Blitzcrank a little bit, not being able to get the rocket grab early on. But nevertheless, still, his flash is down, so we'll have to see whether or not any advantages can be picked up in this bottom lane. But nevertheless, we do see pretty standard starts coming out from both sides. Double jungling going to be for both teams. And again, this is just to prepare in the event of a lane swap. And that is something that we didn't mention, but I believe we didn't really mention it because the likelihood was pretty slim. Both bottom lanes is a pretty even bottom matchup. I mean, think about it. If you hook in a Braum, that's not really going to do you many favors. And I mean, it's going to be difficult to hook in Subtomic on that Sivir because of that spell shield available. So I guess it's going to be very reliant on how well Subtomic can actually use that spell shield.
I think the big thing here is that Callista, her role in the bottom lane is to be sort of harassing a lot of the time. The early level 2 coming out from Exertus is going to make that difficult. But if she just focuses on harassment and then waits for Memeses to come in with a gank, that's when you're going to see the Blitzcrank shine. Because if you hook in a Braum in a 2 versus 2, as you said, that's not going to go that well for you. But if you do it in a 3 versus 2, probably doesn't matter all that much. I would expect, though, Memeses is going to be spending a lot of time top lane for at least a few minutes, whilst Chriso is not able to flash away from anything.
Yes, and we can see on screen that the community has actually voted for a tie, so no real favorites, or both teams have an equal number of fans, which I'm sure is a great thing for them. But meanwhile, we can see a bit of an advantage building up in the bottom lane. But that is sort of expected from the early level 2 that Exertus were able to pull off. But meanwhile, you can see Chriso taking quite a lot of damage.
Maokai, man, I'm telling you, every single time in the UK scene, he just seems to do really well in lane. Of course, Chriso may be having to play more passive than he would like to due to having burned Flash earlier on. That could be influencing things subtly but surely. But in any case, Flash is making his mark on this top lane, and that is a good sign, I think, for the side of Paria. Chriso can't even put down pressure when he is able to dash in for free and get that Equilibrium Strike off.
Yeah, that does seem to be the case. And I feel like it's going to be tough for Chriso, but I'm also a little bit disappointed that we haven't seen anything from Memeses so far, because I feel like with the bottom lane shoving in, he definitely could have applied a bit of pressure down there, and with the lack of flash around Chriso, he could also be applying pressure in the top lane, but it feels like he's just going for a very passive early game. He could get the 3 buff start and go for a gank immediately, because Rek'Sai has ridiculous sustain in this early game, and as I say that, it does look like he's going around the top, but Hook lands in the bottom.
You know, this is the thing we missed out on, I think, actually, to it from. Hang on, though, because top lane Memes is coming in here onto Chris, so does land that knockup. There's a lot of damage going down. Not a kill, but forcing Chriso potentially out of this lane, for example, would be good for Paria. This is what we're talking about. Whilst that flash is down, that's when you want to pressure. Now, bottom lane, something we didn't mention is how easy it is to proc Sentinel with a Blitzcrank. You hook in, you immediately get your Power Fist. You're guaranteed to get that 16% damage coming out. Dan, he's running towards the top lane, but we do see Piggy as well. They get the charm onto him. Dan goes down for first blood. Piggy picking that one up. Chriso is in a very dicey spot. Does not have flash available. It's going to be hard for him to get out of here. You see Piggy just tanking up the tower, making sure the aggro does not swap onto flash. Quick double kill coming out from the side of Paria. Very good start for them in this second game.
Yeah, so two things I want to mention that went really well for Team Paria in that game. First thing I want to mention is a really nice rotation from Cutie Bacon Piggy. They mentioned that we can dive top, and immediately Cutie Bacon Piggy starts making his way up into the top lane. They spot out Dan with the Tremor Sense, so they know he's around, and rather than go for the risky dive onto Chriso, they just say, okay, let's kill Dan. And with the assistance of Cutie Bacon Piggy, they easily managed to pick that one up. And the second important thing that I want to mention is that Cutie Bacon Piggy's actually the one that tanked the tower. And because he has range, he used that to his advantage to take the first 2 or 3 tower shots. And that meant that both Memses and Flash weren't even at a slight risk of dying to Chriso. So that was a very well executed dive from the side of Team Paria. And it makes me wonder why we didn't see this sort of decision making coming out in the last game.
I think a big thing that Paria have to their advantage this game that they didn't last is that Rek'Sai Tremor Sense. You know, we mentioned it in the pregame. It's hard to rotate and look for vision control against a Rek'Sai because he's going to identify where you are, identify where you're warding by deducing it from where you are, and you're just never going to be able to move around the jungle safely.
Yeah, that is definitely one reason as to why they could have struggled in the last game. And this game, they definitely have had a much better early game. We can already see a 1,000 gold lead in favor of Team Paria. And I can imagine that's only going to grow from this point. With the advantages being built up in the mid lane, look at that. Cutie Bacon Piggy roams top, and he still has a CS lead. I mean, I don't know what's going on with Imbolite. Perhaps Cutie Bacon Piggy managed to force Imbolite back, and that's when he decided to roam. But this isn't looking good for Imbolite. Another rough laning phase coming out for Imbolite in this second game.
He is definitely struggling in this matchup, but as we saw moving towards the late game, he does have the potential to make things happen, as Vladpick did a lot of work in the later stages last game. Whether or not we'll see that this time around on the arguably more difficult to make work Xerath is yet to be determined. But another thing worth pointing out, bot lane is a lot more even this time around. You're not seeing that 20 CS lead built up straight away on Subtomic this time around. He is only 3 ahead, although there is a bigger wave here for the side of Paria. Pugs needs to be a little bit careful. Wow, actually having to flash just as a result of concussive blows being procced onto him. That tells you exactly how strong Braum is right now.
Yeah, and they basically had vision of the river. Oh, I might be cut off because Chriso.
Yeah, Piggy's coming up yet again to try and find something. Dan is here, but Memes is as well. It's a 3 versus 2 flash. Can't get out of the tower range in time. Chriso, he tanks it out. He gets the flash off and gets away. Exertus turning it around. Imbolite looking for maybe some ultimates, but wasn't able to find anything very impactful. Dan now chasing on to Piggy, just keeping him slowed up whilst Imbolite tries to get close. All of those Spirit Fire charges going off onto Dan, not the one that he was looking for. He was trying to pick up that Chriso kill. Now Memesies, don't think Chriso managed to get a reset off the Blade Surge, so unfortunately for him, not able to continue up that pressure. Exertus finding a quick 2 kills, coming back into this early game. Oh, bot lane, hang on a second though, because we do see that Glacial Fissure onto Pugs. He's getting taken down, very low exhaust, keeping him off. Now Flash coming in with that teleport. Wiz is going to have to try and get out of here. Does have Flash available, but it's not enough. That Renslow keeping him close enough. They're just donating the kill over to Pugs. That was a nice answer by Paria to the top lane kills. Memesies coming down here as well. Maybe they can even get a dragon off of the back of this. So very nice play coming out from Paria.
So that all started with a tower dive in the top lane that was compared to their first one was pretty horrendous, and they do give a free kill over to Flash, and he plays that so much better. He gets the stun off onto the right target, and this time the person tanking the tower is Flash, and he's just not that tanky this early on, especially against the tower. So that enabled Chriso to get back into the game, and Cutie Bacon Piggy sort of overcommits, enables plenty of time for Imbolite to come back to the top, and now that massive CS advantage that both Flash and Cutie Bacon Piggy had built up in that top lane is now completely gone. And Exertus have managed to take advantage of the overextension of the side of Team Paria, but they do get themselves a Drake as a result of Exertus overextending a little bit in the bottom lane. So nice return kill from Team Paria. Nice to see that they're still being proactive with their plays and still doing what they can to make sure that they're still relevant, even after the little mistakes that they make.
Absolutely, and this is exciting going into the mid-game because you know that there's going to be some very action-packed fights now that both teams have started getting gold on some of their carries. Looking at the way that gold is distributed, though, it looks like a lot of it has been going towards the jungle and the top laner. For Paria, whoa, Blitzcrank support coming in that mid lane, not able to land that rocket grab onto Imbolite. He does have to burn Flash, though, and Flash being down for a Xerath is a massive, massive deal. That is basically the only reliable jump that he has. Dan tries to come into the bottom lane, misses that explosive cast. Pugs is taking way too much damage to get out of there. Subatomic picking that one up. See Piggy trying to walk through, actually just going to immediately go into Imbolite. Cleanse having to be used, but it is not enough. Piggy instantly picking up that kill. It's what we were talking about, Vidius. Picking up a Xerath is a dicey decision when Ahri is still open, and Piggy loves to play it.
Yeah, he definitely does, but quite a few things happened in that short space of time. We can see that this is the problem with I'm Best support roaming, and this is something that didn't happen in his earlier games where he tried to roam. You need to pick the right time as a support when to roam. And generally the best time to roam is when you're either shoving your wave under the enemy tower or when the enemy bot lane isn't in the lane. And in this instance, I feel like I'm Best support is picking poor times to go on a roaming mission. They have good vision coverage around the river and they can see when he's moving around the map, and they instantly take advantage of that. Meanwhile, Flash might be a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, Chriso has now finished up that Sheen, so he does a lot more damage, but a great knockback at the last second from Flash does manage to peel him off. Mid lane, though, we've got support coming in for another one. This time it lands. Meansies follows up with a great knock-up. Piggy is able to get on out of there, and Imbolite stood no chance in that gank attempt. Paria doing a very good job early on.
And this is the problem with playing a mage that has no defensive summoner spells available. He needs to be playing a lot more passive, but this is what I was talking about from I'm Best support. That time, he picked a good time to roam. It was a 1v1 in the bottom lane. They were aware that it was a 1v1 in the bottom lane, meaning Pug wasn't going to get caught out. And they're just abusing the fact that Imbolite is playing this poor mobility champion, and they're doing a good job of abusing it. Wiz did position himself in a good way that forced Bacon Piggy to have to flash to pick up that kill, but nevertheless, they still do a good job. And now we can see Team Paria with an early lead, but we saw this in the last game. The question is, will they be able to hold it?
That is a good question, to be honest. Support trying to find a hook. He actually gets it on a Wiz. There's a teleport down immediately coming out of Chriso. Pugs, look at the damage he is taking. Chriso with the Blade Surge. He's got the Transcendent Blades too. That is an easy pickup. And I'm Best support. Caught out under the tower right now. Means is coming in for support. Chriso, get out of here. Doesn't have a very easy route out. Has to burn that flash. Memes jumps onto him. Chriso falling very low. Will Ignite pick him up? Not quite, but Piggy will. And now he's trying to find a kill, maybe onto Subatomic, maybe onto Wiz. But I do think they realize that Imbolite has decided to roam down to that bottom lane. They're going to stop applying that pressure. Chriso, that gank attempt, not ideal. It was a one-for-one trade, and it is giving Flash time in this top lane to shove out the wave. He's building a CS lead again. That's very, very bad for Chriso.
Yeah, I could see why he tried to do it, and we do see that Dan is trying to defend this top tower, and I do actually think he's going to be able to defend it. It's going to be a close one in this top lane.
Oh, bot lane, though, with that tower going down, Meepsy's maybe stayed a little bit too long. Boomerang Blade plus those auto attacks coming out, Subatomic doing a lot of damage, but it's not enough. Now we've got Pugex, he's coming in. He's finished up that Cutlass now, so he can chase on a lot easier to Subatomic and Wiz, but there is a good amount of peel coming out of Wiz with that Winter's Bite. I'm best support using that speed up, not able to close the gap though. So good job by Subtomic and Wiz getting out of there, keeping Memesies alive. They do lose the tower in the process. So Exertus, they're not giving up here. You know, they're taking advantages where they can.
And this is what we were talking about in the early game, where these guys do have experience playing as a team. They know to take what objectives they can, and to, even though they might be a little bit behind, they're not letting it affect them too much. They're not what many are familiar with is tilt, and they're not allowing this early game lead that Team Paria have built up to tilt them and fall into oblivion. So good job by Exertus, continuously trying to make proactive plays, and we can see that the top tower was able to be picked up by Flash, which is another great advantage, as well as the bottom tower. So, oh no, he didn't actually manage to pick up the bottom tower, but we do see now that the Drake going to be spawning in 15 seconds. I do expect that this is going to be the next point of contention, but with a TP advantage on Flash, I wonder whether or not they're going to be able to get it.
That was unfortunate for Imbolite, and you know, it's even worse than just, you know, some random mid laner losing mid blue. It's a Xerath. He really needs, especially right now, that cooldown. This has given a good opportunity for Paria to take Dragon. I don't think that Exertus are going to want to fight for it. You know, they're up against Kalista Ren. They also have very little mana on Imbolite, no blue buff now. That gives them a good opportunity, but I like what they're doing. They're trying to find something in the bot lane off of the rotation down from Dragon by having Dan wait in this bush. Maybe they can get a pick here.
That might be what they're trying to do, and you can see they're slowly trying to push up their vision line. They are moving into the enemy jungle and clearing out what vision they can, and I feel like that the teleport had a massive impact as to why they decided not to contest that dragon. With Flash teleporting in, they definitely would have been in a disadvantaged position, and sure, Chriso might have been able to pick up the top lane tower, but I feel like in a 5 versus 4 fight against a Maokai, they would have probably lost more than just the Drake. So good decision to just give it away. It is only the second Drake. That dragon isn't quite as impactful as perhaps the first or third, but nevertheless, advantage gained for the side of Team Paria. Now we can see Exertus looking to put a bit of aggression onto this middle tower.
I mean, they've got good pressure on people under towers due to that Xerath pick, but they also don't have particularly good seed. I mean, Sivir, that's one of the things she struggles with a relatively low base attack range. I'm not sure grouping up this early on is going to be very useful unless it's maybe something like top lane after a sneaky rotation where they have not been seen. Support! Oh, he hooks onto Subtomic. There's a silence as well. Is he going to be able to get out of here? Not a chance. Pugx picking that one up. Wiz now does get a good Glacial Fissure, but it's not enough. Vacant Piggy picks him up. There's a teleport in from Flash, just guaranteeing they pick up this third kill. Tower going to go down as well. Very nice rotations coming in, and good hooks coming in from my best support. They might be able to try and look for 2 towers here. Imbolite, he has decent wave clear, but not enough AP to have good wave clear yet.
Yeah, and
whoa, what happened there? He got stopped mid-hook. Chriso going off on one, trying to find Piggy as well. Not able to do so. Pugx, though, maybe the next target. Flash keeping his team alive. Imbolite tried to go in there and maybe look for something, but Memesies keeping him in a good spot, keeping him away from the back line of Paria. Nearly went very wrong for Paria there. I think if Chriso had been a little bit stronger, it would have. But overall, you know, we're starting to see a big gold lead, big tower lead, big kill lead, big dragon lead, all sorts of big leads coming across for Paria.
I think that was just a little bit of a spectator bug. I do believe that Chriso did actually get hooked in, which is a large reason as to why our best support actually died. And so I do believe that was a little bit of a spectator bug. Nevertheless, we can see their pick composition really coming to fruition. He did successfully manage to catch out a Subtomic with the superior vision control. And this is what we mentioned during Champ Select of how important it was to control that vision, to get it in the right spots. And it is important for Dan and Wiz to be maintaining strong vision control so they can't get picked off like this. They have a good poke composition. They need to be sitting at a distance, getting that poke off, and doing what they can to, so that even if they do get a pick for the side of Team Paria, they're going to be so low that they're going to lose a team fight anyway. But right now, Team Paria are really using their team comp effectively. They're getting the picks that they need. They know what they need to do to win, and thanks to those picks, they're picking up objectives. So now we can see a nice, healthy gold lead building up, and I'm best support is having a pretty good game on this Blitzcrank.
He is actually, you know, we talked about it before and how, you know, obviously it's a bit of a weird pick, but 0-1-7, a very respectable score for a support player to have, and some of his hooks have been very, very impactful as well. So it's not as if he's sort of just ambiently been there during a few fights and picked up assists. No, he's been the one setting up the kills for his team. I like to see that from a Blitzcrank. It has certainly been part of the reason why we're seeing Paria build up this earlier game advantage. Moving on towards the later stages of the game, though, when Krista gets stronger, when Dan gets stronger, it's going to be harder for our best support to have an impact. Because at the moment, you hook one of those guys, it's not the end of the world. Speaking of which, Dan getting up hooked here in the river, but actually trying to turn it around. There's a good explosive cast, just keeping support out of the fight. Krista teleporting down right to where he is knocked to. Exertus getting a nice kill there. Not having that hook available means that if Exertus want to take the next tower in this mid lane, it's going to be harder, although not impossible, for Paria to try and find a kill whilst they are seeing.
Yeah, I feel as though I'm Best Support got a little bit too cocky there. They overextended, they pushed their boundaries just a little bit too much, and they paid the price. And you know, we were talking about how much of a bad early game Imbolite had, but you can see the damage he's doing now.
Oh my god, nearly picking up Piggy. Actually, Chriso flashing forward, that might have been a bit too aggressive. Here comes Flash from the top lane. Chriso is very low, staying alive for now. Now he goes down. Pugs doing a good job of defending in the backline, picking up that kill as well. And actually, a great job by Paria on the defense here. Chriso being a bit too aggressive. There's the hook from a respawn support player. He gets onto Imbolite, and now the turnaround is in full force for Paria. Exertus, how the mighty have fallen. Very, very nice team fight coming out of Paria. Can they find a hook here onto Subatomic? That is the question.
Spell shield.
Oh, nearly going on to him. Not even a spell shield needing to be used. Very nice, just in time for Dragon.
Yeah, and you can see they get such great pick onto Piggy, and that's the point they should have stopped. But for some reason, Chris overextends, he greeds, and doesn't respect the positioning of Flash, and Exertus are just overcommitting. Look at all the tower damage that they're taking. They're literally diving a tier 2 tower, while their two main damage sources from Imbolite and Subatomic aren't doing anything because they're focusing on the tower, and that ends up really badly. And at this point you think, oh, they can just disengage, but no. Team Paria want to keep going that beautiful hook onto Imbolite. It's just, that's the problem with playing a champion like Xerath, and that goes in the massive favor of Team Paria once again. And now picking up the third Drake as well as a 3,000 gold event. Oh, I'm Best Support.
Oh,
the charm does land.
That is a lot of poke damage, but it's not going to secure a kill just yet. One thing worth touching on, Exertus' dragon control has been abysmal in these last games. They have given up 3 dragons for nil twice in a row, relatively early. I'm Support trying to maybe get another hook here, doesn't find it. Body slam keeping Dan safe, but another tower going down now for the side of Paria. They're doing a great job putting pressure onto these outer turrets. Now that Dragon is down, now that all the outer turrets are down, how are we going to see Paria start breaking inner towers? That's the big question, because, you know, we talked about not a great siege coming out of Exertus. There isn't a great siege coming out of Paria either.
And that's basically going to be completely relying on their ability to control vision and get the picks that they need, because that's what their composition's all about. I mean, realistically, what Exertus want to do is they want to get in a position where they can use their poke. They have fantastic poke coming out from Sivir. They have fantastic poke coming out of Imbolite. And while Imbolite is behind, we saw how much damage he did onto Guti Bacon Piggy. They have no magic resist on the side of Team Paria. So Imbolite, even though he doesn't have a massive amount of ability power, he still has damage that you need to respect. And they have strong poke, so they need to be in a position where they can use that poke. But Team Paria, on the other hand, don't want to give them that. They obviously don't want to be in a position where they can allow them to poke them down, so they need to gain that superior vision control. They need to catch Exertus out in a situation where they can just focus a target, take them out, and then they can quickly grab these objectives. And unless it's literally down to the vision control coming out from both teams. And right now we can see good vision control coming out from both sides, but a lot of vision in the top for Team Paria and a lot of vision in the bottom for Team Exertus. And I wonder which half of the map is really that advantageous for either team.
I think it's a lot better for Paria right now to have that top vision. Exertus, their vision in the bot lane is mostly sort of remnants of them trying to set up things like that dragon, which is now gone. So it's relatively useless because it's very unlikely right now that Paria will be focusing their attention down there. So Paria with the vision in the top lane, very, very useful right now. That said, quite a few of those wards just died, which does allow for maybe Exertus to come in here, try and wrestle for more Mega Pro. I'm support man. His hooks doing all sorts of things this game.
Yeah, he's been having some crazy hooks indeed. And one thing we haven't touched on is the Ballista combo. Something that we haven't actually seen in a ridiculous long time. And I wonder whether or not they'll be able to pull it off this game. We can see I'm best support is looking for something. At the moment, they're trying to siege, which is exactly what I feel Exertus kind of want, given their composition. Hook go!
Oh, good spell shield last second there by Subatomic. This would be exactly what Exertus want, I think, if there's a blue buff on Embolite. But with that missing, he's kind of struggling to keep his mana values high enough that they can simultaneously clear the wave and then go for a pick if someone gets out of position. Now, with the slow push that was built up a while ago, we are seeing a rotation here come out from the side of Paria. But the wave clear is pretty good from Exertus. It's going to be hard for them to go for this cone unless Mutant Disease just tanks it up, which could end badly. There's a Blazeful Fissure. Everyone is locked up against that wall. Here comes Chris onto the back line. He's struggling to get onto the right target, though. He's just taking so much damage. Bacon Piggy picks that one up. Imbolite, he's out of mana. And Pugsies, he is full health right now. They're going to pick up Dan. That is an amazing team fight for the side of Paria. They're just going to steamroll through this base, pick up a tower, likely pick up an inhibitor. And this game is a far cry from the last one, Devious. Paria really looking strong here.
And what looked like an awful fight for the side of Team Paria ended up actually perfect for them. They managed to get a 2-0 on the overall trade. And you can see a nice dispersion ultimate coming out from Dan, splitting up the team. But they focus the front line. We know how tanky Flash is, and look at him. He's just sitting there, absorbing all this damage. Pug just kiting Chriso around, doing what he can to get that damage out. And it's exactly the same as what we saw last game. Pug isn't even touched. He hasn't even been hit once throughout this entire team fight, and thanks to the positioning from QT Bacon Piggy, they can easily pick up these kills. Unfortunately for best support, he flashes in to try and get some CC down, and Pug just pulls him back and he says, no, I'm going to throw you in. But so a bit of a miscommunication coming out from those two, but nevertheless, massive fight for Team Paria, and now with that bottom inhibitor down, they can look for Baron.
They absolutely can, and
Chriso
is not super strong right now for Exertus. That said, they are looking to maybe get a pick here onto Paria, and with reinforcements very nearby, it's going to be difficult to do that. Exertus having to just back off. So Paria doing a great job right now. Can they maybe find this Baron? That is the question. It's a tough spot for Exertus to try and pressure due to the fact that there's so many walls that I'm best support can just sit over and try and fish for hooks with.
Yeah, that is the case. And one thing we should probably mention as Exertus is sieging onto this middle tower, Hook does go a little bit wide.
He's coming in here though. Wiz doesn't have a chance, gets picked up immediately. Flash getting onto the back line. Subatomic spending a lot of time not auto-attacking, not good for Exertus. Meanwhile on the back line, Imbolite gets taken down by Muses. This is just falling apart right now for Exertus. That was 4 kills quickly going their way. Chriso, he gets on best support though. At least there's a small consolation prize for the members of Exertus, but I'm not sure it's realistically going to matter here. Look at the scores on all of the members of the side of, oh, Chriso, he gets caught out trying to get away here as well. There comes a jump in from Pug's Flash away. There are members waiting for him, dominating. That is Cutie Bacon Piggy with 7 for 1 right now, really just steamrolling.
Yeah, and that does actually look like we're going to get a surrender vote coming out from Team Exertus. So another quick game, and that's going to be decided by the surrender. So that is going to be 1-1 in favor of the side of Team... it's now 1-1 between Team Paria and Exertus Esports. So definitely a much more action-packed game. Team Paria successfully used their lead in this second game, and with the early advantages that they were able to pick up, they managed to snowball that into their favor, and I really feel like that it's all down to that early Xerath pick. They had purple side. They could have held that mid lane pick much later into the draft. They didn't need to pick it up that